A bright young woman vanishes without a trace. Her car is found abandoned on a snowy rural road. And in the years that followed, countless theories have surfaced, but no clear answers. What happened to Maura Murray that night? On February 9, 2004, 21-year-old nursing student Maura Murray disappeared after a car accident in rural New Hampshire. Despite extensive searches, investigations, and public appeals, she has never been found. The case gained national attention, drawing in experts, journalists, and amateur detectives alike. To this day, Maura's disappearance remains one of America's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. A quiet New England town was pulled into a case that would capture national headlines. A family was left searching for answers that never came, and investigators found themselves facing a situation where every lead seemed to raise more questions than answers. You're watching True Crime Space, where real stories are told with care and every voice matters. Today, we uncover the enduring mystery of Maura Murray. What really happened on that cold February night? Did Maura leave willingly, or was she taken? And why does her story still echo across America 2 decades later? In 2004, Amherst, Massachusetts, was a classic college town. Home to the University of Massachusetts Amherst, it bustled with students heading to classes, studying at libraries, and meeting friends on campus. For many, it was a place of learning and new beginnings, a town where futures were being built. Just over 100 miles to the north sat Haverhill, New Hampshire, a quiet, remote community lined with dense forests and long stretches of rural roads. In winter, snow blanketed the ground, silencing the woods and turning narrow highways into isolated corridors. 2 very different places, connected by a journey Maura Murray would begin, but never complete. Maura Murray was 21 years old. A talented runner, she had competed in track and field throughout high school, earning top honors. After graduation, she was accepted into the prestigious United States Military Academy at West Point. She spent time there training and studying, but after her first year, Maura decided to leave and pursue a nursing degree instead. She transferred to the University of Massachusetts Amherst, closer to home and closer to family. Maura was known as bright, determined, and caring, someone with a promising future ahead. But behind her achievements, she was carrying personal burdens. Family members would later speak about stress in Maura's life, both academic and emotional. In the months before her disappearance, she had experienced several incidents that hinted at deeper struggles, including an incident involving the use of stolen credit card numbers, which resulted in university disciplinary action. Still, to many who knew her, Maura appeared to be moving forward, working toward her nursing career and planning for her future. February 9, 2004, began like any other Monday. At around 1 a.m., Maura had a phone conversation with her older sister Kathleen, while Maura was working a security desk job on campus. Accounts later indicated that the conversation left Maura visibly upset. By the next morning, she emailed her professors, informing them that she would be absent from classes for the week, citing a death in the family. A claim her family would later confirm was untrue. She then withdrew $280 from an ATM, visited a nearby liquor store where she purchased alcohol, and obtained printed directions to locations in Vermont. Maura did not tell her friends, family, or boyfriend about her plans to leave campus that day. By late afternoon, she was driving north in her black 1996 Saturn sedan. Sometime after 7 p.m., along Route 112 in Woodsville, a village in the town of Haverhill, Maura lost control of her car and crashed into a snowbank. A nearby resident, a school bus driver returning home, stopped to offer assistance. He later reported that Maura appeared shaken, but declined his offer to call police, claiming she had already contacted roadside assistance. No one can be sure exactly what happened next. When law enforcement arrived at the crash site just minutes later, Maura was gone. Her car was locked, the windshield cracked, the airbags deployed. Inside, police found some of Maura's personal belongings, including the alcohol she had purchased, some of it spilled, but no obvious signs of a struggle. No footprints led away from the scene in the fresh snow. The short window of time between the crash and the police arrival remains one of the most puzzling elements of the case. It was supposed to be a normal Monday, a day like any other. Instead, Maura Murray stepped into the unknown, leaving behind only questions. When officers from the Haverhill Police Department arrived at the scene on Route 112, they found Maura Murray's black Saturn sedan off the side of the road, its front end damaged from a collision with a tree. The driver's side was facing the wrong direction, as if the car had spun before coming to a stop. The airbags had deployed, and there was a crack in the windshield. Inside the car, police found signs that Maura had been there only minutes before. There were stains on the interior consistent with red wine. Some of the bottles she had purchased earlier that day were either missing or damaged. Her keys, debit cards, and cell phone, critical items, were nowhere to be found. A box of Franzia wine lay open on the rear seat, and other personal items were scattered inside the vehicle. There was no blood inside the car, no clear evidence of injury, and no footprints in the snow leading away from the vehicle. The driver's seat was pushed closer to the wheel than Maura, who stood around 5 feet 7 inches, might normally have it, though interpretations of this detail vary. Efforts to locate Maura immediately in the surrounding area turned up nothing. The air was freezing, the landscape silent except for the sounds of the woods in winter. To the officers at the scene, it was as if she had simply stepped off the road and disappeared into the cold night. Back in Massachusetts, Maura's family was unaware that anything was wrong. They had no idea she had left the campus. They hadn't known about her trip north or that she was anywhere near New Hampshire. When police contacted them, confusion and panic quickly set in. Her father, Fred Murray, rushed to the area immediately, desperate to join the search efforts. In Haverhill, residents who had initially assumed it was just another car accident began to realize something deeper was happening. A young woman, alone in an unfamiliar town, had vanished in a matter of minutes, leaving almost no clues behind. The local community started coming together, offering to help search nearby woods, fields, and back roads. Despite freezing temperatures and difficult terrain, volunteers combed the area on foot and by snowmobile, while helicopters with thermal imaging equipment scanned the forests from above. Still, no sign of Maura emerged. The worry grew heavier with every passing hour. The hope that she had simply wandered off and would soon return started to fade. For her family, each unanswered question was a blow. Why had she gone to New Hampshire? Was she meeting someone? Was she trying to get away from something in her life? The Murrays found themselves trapped between the unbearable possibilities, and with each hour Maura remained missing, the fears deepened. In the absence of evidence, theories began to take shape. Some wondered if Maura had intended to leave her life behind, seeking a new start in the mountains. Others believed she might have accepted a ride from a stranger passing by after the crash. There were even questions about whether she had somehow met with foul play shortly after stepping away from her car. The problem was, there were no eyewitnesses. There were no surveillance cameras on the rural road to capture what happened. There were no clear tracks in the snow to guide the searchers. It was as if the world had simply closed in around her, erasing every trace. As investigators sifted through the few physical clues they had, the possibilities only grew more complicated. Had Maura staged the crash to disappear intentionally? Or had she become vulnerable in those few crucial minutes after refusing help? The questions continued to multiply, but the answers remained elusive. Was Maura running from something? Hiding from someone? Or was she already gone? The road she left behind held no clear direction, only silence. When Maura Murray first went missing, local authorities treated it as a standard missing person case. There was no immediate sign of violence. There was no clear indication of an abduction. It appeared, at first, that Maura had left the scene of the crash under her own power. Haverhill police began by searching the immediate area, focusing on the woods, nearby homes, and roadways. A scent-tracking dog was brought in the next day. The dog picked up Maura's scent from one of her gloves, leading away from the Saturn along Route 112. But the trail stopped abruptly about 100 yards east of the crash site. There were no signs of a struggle on the roadside. There were no drops of blood, no torn clothing, no tire marks suggesting she had been forced into another vehicle. Still, the fact that the scent trail ended so quickly raised serious concerns. It suggested that Maura may have gotten into a car, willingly or otherwise, beyond the site of the accident scene. The bitter cold and rough conditions complicated the early search efforts. Snow covered much of the ground. The thick forest stretched for miles in all directions. And as each hour passed without a trace of Maura, the situation grew more urgent. Investigators began piecing together early clues from the scene and Maura's actions in the hours before her disappearance. Her debit card was missing and had not been used since she left campus. Her cell phone, also missing, had been last pinged by a tower near the crash site, but showed no activity after the night of February 9th. Police found no signs that Maura had used a payphone, and there were no reports of her being spotted hitchhiking. The vehicle itself gave few answers. It had suffered front-end damage consistent with hitting a tree, but investigators could not determine whether Maura was injured in the crash. Some personal belongings, such as school books and clothing, were found inside the car, but her wallet and keys were not among them. A bottle of liquor appeared to have been opened inside the car, although whether it was consumed by Maura remained unclear. Despite careful searching, there were no footprints leading away from the vehicle, and no nearby shelters or houses appeared to have been entered. In many missing persons cases, early signs of foul play or voluntary disappearance emerged quickly. Here, there was only silence, a car left behind, and no indication of where Maura had gone or why. As the investigation continued, a series of difficult questions emerged. Some wondered if Maura had left campus to escape pressures in her personal life. In the days leading up to her disappearance, she had faced academic difficulties and possible disciplinary action over a minor credit card misuse. She had also been involved in a recent car accident just days earlier in her father's Toyota. Friends and family members acknowledged that Maura had been under a great deal of stress, but those who knew her best insisted she would never have left without telling someone. Her father, Fred Murray, became one of the most vocal advocates for the theory that Maura had been the victim of foul play. He repeatedly called for a criminal investigation rather than treating the case as a voluntary disappearance. At the same time, some theorized that Maura might have staged her exit, possibly planning to start over somewhere else. There was speculation that she had been traveling to Vermont to seek solitude or meet someone in secret. Yet no conclusive evidence supported any single theory. The truth remained just out of reach, with each possibility leading to more questions than answers. Outside of official efforts, a storm of public interest began building around Maura's case. Early internet forums like Web Sleuths and other true crime communities picked up the story quickly. Amateur detectives dissected every detail, from Maura's last known phone calls to the items left inside her car. The media coverage grew, sometimes sensationalizing aspects of the case without verified information. Anonymous tips poured in, some helpful, many distracting. Rumors and theories flooded message boards, complicating the work of investigators and, at times, leading searchers down false trails. Private citizens organized search parties, sometimes without coordination with law enforcement, creating tension between officials and the public. The overwhelming attention on the case kept Maura's story alive in the national conversation, but made it harder for investigators to separate fact from speculation. As days turned into weeks and then months, the likelihood of finding Maura alive grew smaller. Her family remained steadfast, holding out hope, but the passage of time cast a long shadow. New leads slowed. Tips became rarer, and somewhere in the cold landscape of New Hampshire, the final moments of Maura Murray's known journey remained locked away, unanswered. As hours turned into days, the hope of finding Maura alive began to fade. In the weeks following Maura Murray's disappearance, a handful of leads captured the attention of investigators and the public alike. One of the earliest came from a local couple living near the crash site. On the night Maura vanished, they reported hearing a loud, sudden scream coming from the woods outside their home. The scream was brief and never repeated. The couple later said they thought little of it at the time, only realizing its possible significance after news of the disappearance spread. Law enforcement searched the area around their property, but no physical evidence was found. Still, the report lingered as one of the few eyewitness clues connected to the timeline. Another point of interest emerged at a house near the crash site. Sometime after Maura's disappearance, neighbors noticed that the homeowners poured fresh concrete in their basement. The timing raised suspicions. It seemed unusual that such a major renovation would happen during winter, especially in an area where construction projects typically waited for spring. Local police and private search teams took notice. Years later, in 2017, the property was searched using ground-penetrating radar. The scan showed anomalies beneath the concrete, but a cadaver dog brought to the scene did not alert to the presence of human remains. Ultimately, law enforcement decided not to tear up the foundation. The lead was considered explored but unresolved, leaving lingering questions in the minds of those following the case. At the same time, strange phone calls began reaching Maura's family. Fred Murray, her father, reported receiving anonymous calls that were either silent or immediately disconnected when answered. In at least one case, a call came from a prepaid phone card traced to the Burlington, Vermont area, not far from where Maura appeared to be headed. The calls suggested someone, somewhere, might know more than they were saying. But no hard evidence ever connected these calls to Maura's whereabouts. They became another thread in an already tangled web of uncertainty. As weeks turned into months, both police and private investigators continued chasing every tip that came their way. Hundreds of reported sightings poured in from across New England and beyond. At convenience stores, gas stations, even on busy highways, people thought they had seen a young woman matching Maura's description. Each report was taken seriously, each one was followed up, and each one led to disappointment. Time and again, investigators found themselves at the end of a trail with no connection to Maura. The digital world offered no more answers. Investigators scoured her online activity, including emails and websites visited before her disappearance. There were no secret plans uncovered, no evidence that Maura had been communicating with strangers or planning to meet someone in secret. The last documented online activity from her was practical, searching for directions, checking lodging options, and sending emails to professors explaining a temporary absence. None of it pointed toward a permanent disappearance. Private investigators hired by the family launched their own efforts. They searched woods, bodies of water, abandoned buildings, and back roads, hoping for any sign that the official searches might have missed. At times, they found clothing items, tire tracks, or disturbed ground, but testing always ruled out a connection to Maura. Leads that once seemed promising eventually dried up, and the case settled into an unsettling quiet. Meanwhile, the local community remained on edge. Questions lingered about whether someone in the area knew more than they were willing to admit. Law enforcement reviewed known offenders living nearby, but no strong suspects emerged. There was no confession, no witness willing to come forward with critical information. The investigation remained wide open, but without new momentum. Every time it seemed investigators were on the verge of a breakthrough, reality forced them back to the beginning. The scream in the woods, unexplained. the concrete basement, unsearched beyond radar scans. The anonymous calls, unanswered. Each piece of the puzzle remained stubbornly disconnected from the others. As months became years, Maura's family clung to hope, pushing for renewed searches and refusing to let the case be forgotten. The public's attention ebbed and flowed, fueled by anniversaries, documentaries, and online speculation. But in the hard, cold facts of the case, progress remained elusive. Every time investigators thought they were close, the truth slipped further away. Since the earliest days of the investigation, law enforcement officials have emphasized one key fact. No suspect has ever been formally named in Maura Murray's disappearance. The case remains open but officially unsolved. Despite this, whispers of suspicion have traveled through the communities touched by Maura's story. Some residents near the crash site became subjects of quiet scrutiny. Rumors circulated about a handful of individuals known to law enforcement for unrelated offenses. One man, living within sight of where Maura's car was found, was noted in online discussions for past violent behavior. However, no public evidence tied him directly to the night Maura vanished. Another local resident was questioned after odd behavior following the crash, but again, nothing concrete linked him to her disappearance. These names stayed mostly confined to internet forums and speculation. Investigators, both official and private, looked into these possibilities, but each inquiry ended with no charges, no arrests, and no public confirmation of involvement. The people of Haverhill, a small town not used to being at the center of national headlines, were left under a long shadow of suspicion without resolution. Beyond local speculation, some theorists looked to a larger, more chilling possibility. Israel Keyes, a known serial killer active during the early 2000s, operated throughout New England and beyond. Keyes admitted to traveling extensively, often selecting victims at random and leaving few traces behind. Some wondered if Maura could have crossed paths with him by chance. The timeline made it conceivable. Keyes was in the Northeast during parts of 2004. His methods often involved remote locations, isolated victims, and a rapid disappearance that left investigators baffled. However, when authorities dug deeper, they found no direct evidence connecting Israel Keyes to Maura Murray. He never mentioned her case among his known crimes, even when confessing to other murders after his arrest, and investigators tracking his movements could not definitively place him in New Hampshire on the night Maura vanished. As a result, although his name continues to appear in online discussions, law enforcement has not identified him as a credible suspect in this case. It remains one of many possible but unsupported theories. Without a confirmed suspect, speculation about what happened to Maura has widened into three main possibilities. The first theory suggests Maura was abducted by a stranger after the crash. This idea fits the eerie gap between her last confirmed sighting and the sudden loss of her scent trail. Rural Route 112 was remote, but not completely deserted, and the wrong person passing by at the wrong moment could explain her disappearance without warning or witness. The second theory proposes that Maura planned her own escape. Supporters of this idea point to her withdrawal of cash, her printed directions toward Vermont, and the vague email to her professors. Perhaps she sought to disappear intentionally, to start a new life, away from academic pressures and personal struggles. However, for those close to Maura, the theory has always been difficult to accept. Her plans for the future, graduation, nursing career, family connections, seemed too real to simply abandon. The third theory explores the possibility of an accident or even suicide. If Maura became disoriented or overwhelmed, she might have wandered into the woods, succumbing to exposure in the harsh February night. Yet, despite numerous searches, no remains have ever been recovered. The silence in the evidence leaves this theory as incomplete as the others. After 2 decades of searching, questioning, and hoping, the case of Maura Murray remains where it began, surrounded by uncertainty. In some ways, the absence of clear answers has only deepened the mystery. Facts are few. Physical evidence is scarce. And in that void, imagination fills the gaps. Loved ones and strangers alike have asked, if no trace was left behind, could the truth be more complex than anyone expected? Could Maura's story involve not just actions in the physical world, but decisions, fears, and battles hidden deep within her own mind? When a young woman disappears so completely, the explanations are never simple. Each theory carries its own heartbreak. Each unanswered question keeps the search alive. Sometimes the darkest secrets live not in evidence, but in the human mind. As the years passed, the investigation into Maura Murray's disappearance remained active but stalled. Without a confession, without a witness stepping forward, and without the discovery of her body, authorities could not close the case. The New Hampshire State Police have kept Maura's file open, officially listing her as a missing person rather than reclassifying the case as a homicide. Over time, leads grew fewer. The original officers who first searched for Maura retired or moved on, handing the case over to new generations of investigators. At intervals, law enforcement has renewed appeals to the public, asking for information. They have conducted occasional searches based on new tips, including ground-penetrating radar studies and re-examinations of nearby properties. Still, no major breakthrough has come. Every potential lead has so far led back to the same silence that surrounded the snowy roadside in February 2004. Maura's disappearance remains one of the most haunting mysteries in American true crime, not only because she vanished, but because so little trace was left behind. For Maura's family, the passing years have never dulled their determination. Fred Murray, Maura's father, became the public face of the family's efforts. He spent countless hours in New Hampshire, walking dense woods, handing out flyers, speaking to reporters, urging officials to continue searching. The Murrays organized yearly vigils near the crash site. Family, friends, and supporters gathered in hope, holding candles against the cold night air, sharing memories, and refusing to let Maura's name be forgotten. The vigils became both a remembrance and a protest, a way to demand that answers still mattered, even as seasons changed and public attention shifted elsewhere. Over time, Maura's siblings, especially her brother Curtis, joined in publicly calling for renewed attention to the case. They worked with journalists, cooperated with documentarians, and kept speaking out, no matter how long it had been since Maura's face had appeared on the evening news. To this day, her family maintains the belief that someone, somewhere, knows something. And until that person steps forward, or new evidence is uncovered, they continue their fight. Beyond Maura's immediate family, her story left an unmistakable mark on the wider culture of true crime awareness. Her case was one of the first major missing persons investigations to unfold in the early internet era. True crime forums, blogs, and later social media platforms became deeply involved, sparking conversations and debates across the country. Online communities followed each new development, analyzed documents, and generated new theories at a speed never seen before in cases of this kind. In the years that followed, Maura's disappearance inspired numerous documentaries, including a multi-part series by Oxygen that re-examined key elements of the case. Writers and researchers have included Maura in books exploring missing persons cases and the phenomenon of disappearances in rural America. Podcasts dedicated entire seasons to analyzing her timeline, interviews, and the available evidence. Importantly, Maura's story also helped raise awareness about how missing persons cases involving young women are handled, both by law enforcement and by the media. It shined a light on patterns of initial miscommunication, delays in search efforts, and the power of early public involvement. It reminded the world that missing persons cases are never just statistics. They are families, futures, and lives interrupted without warning. Even now, 2 decades later, Maura's name still echoes in the frozen New Hampshire woods. It lives in the questions left unanswered, in the hearts that continue to search, and in the voices that refuse to let her story be forgotten. The Maura Murray case reminds us how quickly life can change, and how difficult it is to find closure without clear answers. A life that once held so much promise, a family forever torn, and a mystery that continues to echo in the minds of those who follow it. 2 decades have passed, and yet Maura's story is still unresolved. We've seen how crucial it is to improve the way missing persons investigations are handled, the need for better resources, more effective responses, and deeper support for families in crisis. Mental health struggles are often behind many disappearances, and it's a reminder of how we must support those facing unseen battles. Also, as true crime continues to captivate, we must be mindful of how we report these stories. Behind every headline is a real person, a family, and the consequences of speculation. Maura Murray was loved, she is missed, and her story is not over. Though the answers may still elude us, her name continues to hold meaning, and her case remains a symbol of the countless other stories that need to be told. What theory makes the most sense to you? Could Maura have left willingly, or did something else happen that night? Is there a piece of the puzzle we've overlooked? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Your insights might shed light on something we haven't considered yet. If you're fascinated by cases like Maura Murray's and want to keep up with more deep dives into unsolved mysteries, make sure to hit that like button. Your support helps us bring these important stories to a wider audience. And if you haven't already, subscribe to True Crime Space and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Almost every day, we explore another case, unravel another mystery, and take you closer to the most compelling stories in true crime.